Story 1. I was walking my dog through a park when it was quiet, and I came around a corner to see a 60-year-old man and his father, who was in poor health, sitting on a bench overlooking a scenic area. The son had his arm over his father's shoulder and was singing softly an old tune. I didn't know it, as his father stared off over the water with a big smile on his face. It was so simple and unexpected, but I will never forget it. Story 2. One time I was sitting with my best friend at the time on their porch. A little girl and her father were walking by. She asked, "Can we get ice cream, please?" He responded with, "No, you haven't had dinner yet." Then a few minutes later, they walked back the other way, and they both had ice cream. Story 3. I was on a plane from Australia to Europe, and we were flying over Greece in the early morning. I was pretty much the only person awake. I looked out the window. Below was a huge thunderstorm, with lightning flashes through the clouds. Above us, the most perfectly clear starry night sky I had ever seen. Then, while I was watching, the sun rose over the horizon. Story 4. Possibly a different definition of beautiful than yours, but there's a nursing home down the street from me. On Mother's Day 2020, after everything was locked down, the nursing home hosted a drive-by Mother's Day parade. 100 cars decorated with balloons, crepe paper, and homemade signs drove past the nursing home and my house while the residents were lined up on the sidewalk in their wheelchairs. It was just the sweetest, most beautiful expression of love in a time when everyone needed some. I'm crying again right now just thinking about it. It was lovely. Story 5. Was in the middle of the Mediterranean, and for about 10 minutes the sea, as far as you could see, was full of whales jumping out of the water, and then they were gone. Story 6. The look on my wife's face when she's really feeling good about herself lights up in this really authentic, sweet way. Because I've seen her struggle with really not liking herself at times. When she has more moments where she does, it is really beautiful to see. Story 7. The little blip of a heartbeat on the ultrasound machine when I went in with my sister, who thought she had miscarried while her husband was away for work. Story 8. A lot. Sunset in the desert between India and Pakistan. Sunrise on Mount Fuji. Swimming in a cenote. Greece in general. Fjords in Norway. Our planet is unbelievable. Story 9. This photo of the Carina Nebula. I found a version in the original resolution and had a 3x5-foot canvas custom printed. It is the only wall art I have ever bought. Story 10. My wife staring into the eyes of each of our newborn children, tears in her eyes, meeting them for the first time. Closely followed by looking into my wife's eyes during our wedding vows and the first time I ever laid my eyes upon her. Space is cool too. Story 11. I have a memory of my wife floating down the lazy river at a resort with sunlight glinting off the water droplets clinging to her. She's just everything to me. Story 12. Personal. My wife nursing our newborn child. Honorable mention. The first time I made my child belly laugh. In nature, I witnessed the 2004 Leonid meteor shower high in the Allegheny Mountains. At the peak, they were falling like rain. It was like something out of a storybook. It was a memory I was happy to share with my mom and dad and brother. Story 13. I have two things. The first one was while kayaking back in the 1990s. We stopped in the middle of a big lake just to lay down and chill in the kayaks. It was a full moon night with no wind, so the whole lake became a giant mirror, and the only visible light was from the moon and the stars. It was so bright, and we were in awe. The second time was in the army. It was an early morning, and the platoon was sitting on a small hill of green moss having breakfast. It was like sitting on a throne watching a great canvas. The sun was streaming down between birch trees, and the rays were like individual beams of gold, lighting up the ground covered in fog. We call it the fairy dance when the moisture from a cold night starts evaporating, creating a wandering mist twirling across the ground, literally dancing between the trees. I'm not sure how far away from the lake we were sitting, but it was like watching some incredible painting taking shape, a piece of creation just before our eyes, and the mist rolling out across the lake shining in tints of silver, gold, and greens. Everyone, and I mean everyone, stopped eating and just sat there watching it. This was like 60 dudes being humbled by the beauty of nature enveloping before us. I never had a moment like that before and never had one since. It was beyond magical. I guess everyone sat quiet and didn't move for a full 10 minutes. You could have dropped a nail a mile away, and we would have heard it. Story 14. Recently, traffic was stopped due to geese crossing, and there was one limping way in the back. One of the geese turned around, went back for its injured friend, and walked with it until it got safely across the road. Later on that same trip, I saw a different flock of geese chasing each other, biting one's butt. So, duality at its finest. Story 15. In 1995, my best friend's 13-year-old little brother was talked into a game of Russian roulette by an 18-year-old person. He lost. While we were on our way to the cemetery for the burial, there was a kid, maybe 14 to 16 years old, who was raking leaves. As the funeral procession went by, he stopped raking leaves, took off his hat, and bowed his head in respect. I cry even now thinking about it. Story 16. The night stars in the Australian outback. I'm an American, and it was a bit disorienting not to recognize the night sky, but so very cool at the same time. Story 17. The neighborhood fox, who was friendly with me to the point that I can give him tummy rubs, sat next to me in the sun and had this beautiful look of contentment. Story 18. I once was on the top of a mountain. Then the night came. The sky was so beautiful. I mean, the beauty of the stars and the moon in the night from a high mountain. Everyone should see that. Story 19. A lot of things come to mind, even people. I am really lucky. But places? Those may be more interesting to you all. I have watched the orange clay canyons in Arizona glow around sunset, with the green river below and the sky turning into a painting. There were tiny lizards hiding in the sparse brush. There was a time when the snow and ice froze the daffodils, magnolias, and cherry blossoms in glass. I wandered around the brick buildings and massive trees surrounding them as the lampposts lit the snow drifts. Once, I lay down on top of a picnic table by the edge of a desert river and watched the stars light up the skies over the hills, the nearest little town being miles away. They were strangely colorful. I was taking pictures as we passed through Munich. The sun began to set. For the first time, I was in a city center, surrounded by musicians playing Italian music and smelling the street food. The old buildings, the people, the flower boxes, all of it were so much for me that I froze and my group lost me. And of course, the rainforests in Oregon and waterfalls. Really, aside from the trees and the strange little flowers, the most memorable part was the feeling of being surrounded by water, the birdsong, and the smell of all that moisture mixing with moss and trees and soil. Story 20. My grandma with dementia lit up when her favorite song came on. For just a moment, she was completely herself again, humming every note perfectly. It made me realize memories aren't just stored in our brains. They're in our whole being. Story 21. So if I asked you about art, you would probably give me a summary on every art book ever written. Michelangelo, a lot about him, life's work, political aspirations, his relationship with the Pope, sexual orientations, the whole works, right? But I'll bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You've never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling, seen that. If I ask you about women, you would probably give me a syllabus about your personal favorites. You may have even been with a few women, but you can't tell me what it feels like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy. You're a tough kid. And if I asked you about war, you would probably quote Shakespeare at me, right? Once more unto the breach, dear friends. But you've never been near one. You've never held your best friend's head in your lap, watched him gasp his last breath looking to you for help. If I asked you about love, you would probably quote a sonnet. But you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. Known someone that could level you with her eyes, feeling like God put an angel on earth just for you, who could rescue you from the depths of hell. And you wouldn't know what it's like to be her angel, to have that love for her, be there forever, through anything, through cancer. And you wouldn't know about sitting up in the hospital room for 2 months, holding her hand, because the doctors could see in your eyes that the terms visiting hours don't apply to you. You don't know about real loss, because it only occurs when you've loved something more than you love yourself. and I doubt you've ever dared to love anybody that much. And look at you. I don't see an intelligent, confident man. I see a cocky, scared young kid. But you're a genius, Will. No one denies that. No one could possibly understand the depths of you. But you presume to know everything about me because you saw a painting of mine and you tore my life apart. You're an orphan, right? You think I know the first thing about how hard your life has been, how you feel, who you are, because I read Oliver Twist. Does that encapsulate you? Personally, I don't care about all that because you know what? I can't learn anything from you I can't read in some book. Unless you want to talk about you, who you are, then I'm fascinated. I'm in. But you don't want to do that, do you? You're terrified of what you might say. Your move, Chief. Story 22, Birth of My Son. Even in the darkest moments, pulling that memory up in my head is like when Gandalf uses his staff to scare off the Nazgul. It's like watching the universe itself be born. Story 23. The other week, my daughter fell asleep in my arms, and it brought me back to when she was a newborn and wouldn't sleep unless she was with me. I almost cried, realizing her baby features are almost gone. Story 24. My autistic son, finally after years of work, is not depressed and triggered. He's just a happy kid. It broke my heart, but maybe, just maybe, I did something right. Story 25. When I was 5, someone brought in a beaver skull for show and tell. It was by far the most beautiful thing I had seen, and it still influences me today. I love collecting oddities. Story 26. My brother's wedding. I always disliked him. He's mean to me, but when I heard his vows and how absolutely beautiful they were, I could see the most genuine sign of affection I ever did in person. Story 27. I went to a music festival and someone brought a huge ball of pink yarn. The artist Jai Wolf was playing some beautifully emotional music, and people were passing the yarn around until eventually, there was a massive pink line zigzagging the span of this field in Michigan at sunset, connecting everyone holding onto a piece of it. Then it started to rain in the best way, and everyone cried happy tears. Story 28. My husband enjoys being a dad, playing with his babies. The laughs and smiles that come with it make me tear up. Just 3 best friends having the best time whenever they can. Story 29. The most beautiful thing I have ever seen was the moment when I witnessed a sunrise over a vast mountain range during a hiking trip. As the first light of dawn broke over the peaks, the sky transformed into a breathtaking canvas of vibrant oranges, pinks, and purples. The way the sunlight gradually illuminated the rugged terrain made it feel like the mountains were coming to life, revealing their intricate details and textures. What made this experience even more profound was the sense of peace and solitude that enveloped me in that moment. The world was still quiet, with only the gentle rustle of leaves and distant bird songs breaking the silence. It felt as if time stood still, allowing me to fully appreciate the beauty around me. Story 30. My healthy daughter, when she was born after the initial cleaning, she was born in 2002 and is just as beautiful today as she was on that day. Inside and out, such a great person. I'm so proud of her. Story 31. Seeing my daughter born was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen or will ever see. She had a physical deformity in her feet, but she was otherwise healthy, and that was wonderful. She just turned 19. Thankfully, she had an amazing doctor who performed a series of miracle surgeries when she was very young. Even though other doctors told us she might never walk, she walked at about 2.5 years. That was the second most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Story 32. Honestly, the night sky at my wilderness program in Oregon was breathtaking. I would cowboy camp on most clear nights when we were out in the desert, and I have never seen so many stars in my life. The staff gave us a constellation map, so I would try to find as many as I could each night. Story 33. I woke up around 6 a.m. just as the sun was coming up. I refilled our water from the lake, and as I did that, a family of deer came over the ridge and down to the lake where I was and had a drink of water about 30 feet from me. The 2 little fawns with them were pretty adorable. Story 34. My newborn daughter, for sure. In second place, I went into Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina last May and got to see the blue ghost fireflies for the first time. I went with the intention of taking photos, but when they came out for the night, I was too overwhelmed and in awe. It was otherworldly and a moment I will never forget. I hope to go back this spring and actually photograph them this time. Story 35. We were watching the sunset over Niagara Falls when the beauty made me cry. A tiny, very old Asian lady next to me was crying too. We grinned at each other, then held hands crying until the sun was gone. Story 36. My grandpa saying goodbye to his mom for the last time. Or, on the other side of my family, my great-grandpa crying and laughing when my grandpa came in when great-grandpa wasn't doing well. That hit so hard. During the fall, the sunrises and sunsets are absolutely gorgeous here in Wisconsin. Story 37. My ex-boyfriend was abusive towards me and my dog, so it took a long time for her to be okay around men after I left him. Now she gets upset when my fiancé doesn't let her kiss him for a few minutes straight when he gets home from work. It brings me a lot of joy to know that she feels so safe and happy around him after spending so many years scared of any man who came within a few feet of us. Story 38. Not something that was physically seen. The first time I realized I wasn't paralyzingly anxious after having daily panic attacks for over 10 years. I started medication this year, and I haven't had a panic attack in almost 9 months. It was a surreal moment. I cried tears of joy. I finally feel peace.